listening to the 10 Questions with the Musical Mind podcast with your host, Peter Harris.
Hello everyone, welcome back to 10 Questions with the Musical Mind. Thanks for tuning in with us again. This is Peter Harris here, and this week we welcome bassist Bjorn Englen. Of course, Bjorn is with the bands Foundry and Soul Sign, and of course most prominently with Dio Disciples as they head back out on their Dio Returns tour for the first time here in America. So that'll be a big show. The much vaunted hologram tour, but it's a lot more than that. And if you listen further, you'll get more details on just how much more it is than just merely a hologram show. But of course, Bjorn has played with Yngwie Malmsteen, Quiet Riot, Robin McCauley, Uli John Roth, Tony McAlpine, a lot of people, a lot of prominent musicians. So he's got a lot of stories to share and some tips on how to approach an instrument, how to develop good habits, songwriting craft, all kinds of things. We have a great conversation here, and I think you'll enjoy it. Hey Bjorn, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. You've got some exciting stuff coming up. I mean, you just got off the road with Tara Lynch in Europe, and you're heading back out with Dio Returns. It's the first time in the States, right, for the tour. Is it a different feeling having, with the hologram in the middle, like I just know the stage stuff, you've got the drummer on the other side of the stage as opposed to center stage. Is it kind of a different feel dynamic having him like not right behind you?
A little bit. I mean, I can see and hear Simon well, so that's important for
Sure.
cues and endings and things like that. And so it's really not weird or bad at all. We have a good crew. We have a good monitor guy, and everything's making sure that we can hear each other well and all that stuff. So it's working out really good so far. And I like the setup. And, we got drums and guitar on one side and bass and keyboards on the other side. So
right.
It's cool. It's been working out great so far. We got lots of screens on them too, as opposed to in Europe. We didn't have all that stuff. We had some screens, but that portion has been expanded. And,
okay.
So I'm excited. And the hologram's been updated and improved and all that stuff too. So it's going to be good. It's going to be a good show.
That's very cool. Now, will the set list differ at all from the previous tours, or?
It's going to differ. We try to always kind of change it up, even with the throw in some new stuff. We one or two things we've never done before, we pulled some stuff out, pulled some other stuff back in that we haven't played in a while. And we took some stuff out that, it's hard to take stuff out because most of the stuff is, expected.
Right. Yeah.
By fans, and so it's that's a difficult part. There's a lot of must plays.
Sure.
That are in the set. So for obvious reasons, but yeah.
Yeah. There's some songs you absolutely cannot leave out. Yeah. And I'm sure it helps that Craig Goldie plays a mean Richie Blackmore. I mean, he can really nail that stuff.
Yeah, he really does, and it is cool, especially the fact that we do a lot of Rainbow, and it's cool. It's really cool, and he does it well, and it kind of the way that he did Dio, how he did how the band did the Rainbow and Black Sabbath. They kind of stayed true to the original. For the most part, for most of the players did,
right?
At least, but Craig is amazing that way, and they're all great, and Simon too, and Scott. They've all played with Ronnie for years. That it's really cool that when we do the hologram, if someone was to close their eyes, or even with the hologram, obviously closed, it's good. It sounds really well together and well molded, and all that stuff too. So it's exciting,
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. One thing I wanted to ask you is where did they pull the footage and the audio from? Like, was it previously unreleased performances of his, or were they pulling it from something you could see elsewhere on a DVD? Or...
Yeah, the audio went through many various different live recordings of released material, stuff that's public, and picked the ones where he thought his vocals were the most outstanding. And so they're from his whole career, basically, spanning all the way back through 85, 86.
Okay.
All the way up till about towards the very end, like 2004, 2005, last few years that the band Dio was active. So, and actually later than that, we got some from Heaven and Hell as late as 2007.
Right.
So kind of a big span over a few decades. So it's cool, it's really good, and it's and then visually the picture is actually not live from Ronnie's live performances, because the problem with that is you got a lot of back stuff in the background that's it's very difficult to edit out. You got backline and drums and
Sure.
different musicians and things like that. If he was performing in front of a green screen, it would be different. So that had to be recreated by through other methods and stuff like that. So
Gotcha.
And his face has been recreated digitally from scratch. So it's that's a difficult part.
Yeah.
So it's quite a process that they've been through, the company to update and recreate all these different different songs of holograms and stuff like that. So it's very time consuming. So that's one of the reasons it's been taking a while.
Yeah, I can see that would take a while. Have you seen an evolution in Dio Disciples since you're forming, like just in your approach to songs? I mean, obviously songs evolve on the road, but do you see a growth there in the band just the longer you guys are together?
Well, I think we're bonding, in different ways, musically and as friends and everything. There's always been a good vibe, and we're obviously 6 completely different people, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
We all bring different things to the table, just for the audience and for each other and for the band and for the music. But musically, I think we also learned more about each other, and we, as far as performance-wise, but also we are working on original material for an upcoming album. So that's been going pretty well. We have kind of like paused that process recently, but it's also been going really well, and it's also a result of us working together for a while and kind of like doing a lot of shows and things like that, which I think is a good thing sometimes when you make an album together, because you can sort of like clearly visualize the end result more, and why you do things and what kind of songs do we want to play live when the album's out and things like that. That's sort of like in the past too, like something when we're writing and coming up with stuff. So
right.
It's going well. It's been exciting, and we're looking forward to that as well.
Cool. I'm looking forward to that. That's neat to hear. And I like how in the live show you've got, it's not just Dio's performances. You obviously have Tim and Oni along, and 2 guys I love, especially Oni. I'm a big fan of, but that brings an awesome element and a variety to the show. I think that's really cool.
I think the people that have been negative towards the whole, I think a lot of them didn't or don't realize that actually most of the show, almost more than half of the show, is without the hologram.
Right.
So it's still like the Dio Disciples, basically. And I think if people went to see the show, not only would they be surprised of how much they would actually appreciate the hologram, but also the fact that it's a rock show, it's a band. If it was just a hologram, you wouldn't have that same balance and the same dynamics. So I think it's a really good thing that we're mixing it up, and it's better for the fans and it's better for us, and it makes the hologram more special too when you do bring it out.
Right.
It makes it more special. So yeah, definitely.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's important for people to realize that it's not a gimmick. It's a real rock show with world-class performers, and the hologram is a sort of a feature that you get on top of that.
Oh, absolutely. It's also like an icing on the cake. And then when we did the show in Europe back in 2007, we did about 10 or 11 shows throughout Europe, and we did quite as many hologram appearances. There was 6 or 7. I think it was like 5 times or something like that. So it was definitely, the majority was without the hologram, and it was definitely a rock show, and the hologram was like the icing on the cake.
Right.
And that was a really good way to debut the whole thing like that. And it was well received, and we ended up selling out the last 3 or 4 shows, which were large venues. The biggest venues of the whole tour were all sold out. So that was a good thing to show that, people had been, people spoke well of it, and people were happy with what they heard about it and saw. It's hard to kind of experience it on YouTube, but you kind of get the idea, and you hear about other people's response to the whole thing, and reviews and things like that. So
yeah. Now, talk about your songwriting. Like, initial guess, how do you think a song idea starts for you? Like something from like Soul Sign, like Life from Life in the Dark, or just as an example. Like, do you usually have like a vague idea of a mood or an atmosphere, or do you start with a riff or a lyric idea? I mean, what usually is the jumping off point for you?
Usually I'll write on bass. I'll write a bass line or a riff or something like that. And song Live, there was a good example of how it would quickly came together. And it was sort of bits and pieces at a time where I wrote the bass line. It was real simple. Kind of lyrics came together, vocal line came together really quick. And then from there, I added the guitar melody intros and things like that. So the song kind of built from real simple. Sometimes that's how songs are written, is like they're very, very simple. Kind of leaves it wide open for the melody to kind of go anywhere the fountain of inspiration wants to take you at the moment, so to speak. So funny enough is usually what happens when I am working on something musically. I don't know if it's a subconscious thing, but any lyric that I happen to write at the same time, although I don't intentionally write the lyric for that idea, they seem to work together. So it might be something in my subconscious that kind of decides that, these are going to go together, and I'm coming up with lyric ideas because of the music that I wrote without even realizing it. So that's kind of an interesting thing too, where it kind of puts you in the mood of whatever music that you're writing, and it creates images and stories and experiences and stuff like that.
Yes.
But writing on bass, I think, has always been an advantage for me, because you get rhythmic ideas, and any riffs you write tend to be a little maybe more rhythmically oriented than as opposed to writing something on guitar. I already know what the drums are going to be like to support that, and the guitar almost writes itself too. So it's for me, it's been a really good tool. I mean, occasionally I'll write on guitar, but it's rare.
Your version of Jingle Bells, that's got to be one of the most original of the whole rock Christmas song genre. That's got to be one of the most original arrangements I've ever heard. It's really cool. I mean, what was the inspiration for that?
I think we just figured, hey, let's just, somebody asked me, like, look, you want to be part of a Christmas rock album? And I said yes, and I thought of that song, the first song I thought of. And then I my only idea was like, let's just at least keep the main melody as an intro.
Right.
And then I just started, and I came up with a groove, and then I figured that groove could go underneath the melody, and then we'll just take it somewhere, and I just went with it and changed the arrangement, and then the guitar player sort of, came up with some stuff that was, worked. Yeah. With that, and then took off during the guitar solo and did something really amazing. But so that was fun. We were just kind of, that came together really quick too. I didn't put too much thought into it. I was just a couple of different sections, and again to keep it simple, and it worked out pretty well, and people seemed to dig it. So
yeah, I thought it was refreshing, because a lot of times it's I'm going to play Joy to the World with a little gain on it and then do a solo. It's nothing that original, and I'm not knocking it, because a lot of artists have done it. But I thought that was a really original take. I was impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting, because that was recorded onto one of those Roland 880 workstations. It was only 8 channels, and I think we might have used 4 channels on the drums or something like that, 4 or 5, kick, snare, and then one or two overhead, something like that, and then just one bass, one guitar. So I kind of kept it simple, and was it kind of worked out pretty good. So yeah.
Yeah,
it was a fun piece to do. So.
Yeah, it's interesting, the guitar player that the opening, like what would be the lyric line, the melody in the original song, he's like, I know, let's just play something creepy as hell, and like it's
right.
It's a really interesting take, but
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know you teach a lot. Sorry, I'm jumping around my notes a little bit. You teach a lot. What would you say is like one of the main stumbling blocks when you're giving lessons or kind of showing younger players what to do? Like what seems to be a universal or near universal problem or hurdle?
There's a few things. I think people tend to forget to practice to a metronome and keeping things, the rhythm, and keeping track of, when people start out, especially, where's the one, and 1, 2, 3, 4 type thing, tapping the foot. And there's a lot of things with fingerings too, like consistent fingering. Like one of the important things I teach is to always use the same fingering for similar things and same types of things. So when you're in a specific key, use the same finger on the same note every time. So when you try to play the song again 20 years later, your muscle memory is going to help you.
Right.
And I see this with players that have played for decades too, and they're semi-professional or professional, and they're just all over the place with the fingers. And I'm going like, there's no way this guy's going to remember this song 5 years from now, 3 years from now, and stuff like that. So those are two things. But there's a lot of things. I notice a lot of teachers teach bass players to play stuff using as many open strings as possible, so they don't have to move around a lot. And that's really like shooting yourself in the foot, because whatever you learn, you can only play that in one key. Then you got to relearn the same thing 12 times again if you want to play it in a different key. So it's kind of insane to do it that way.
Not to mention
strings.
There's a different resonance. There's a different resonance in an open string and a fretted note too. That would bug me. It would.
100%. And I see that when people play, and I'm going, man, this is just it's just a lazy way of playing. You play an open D, you're not going to have the same punch and bottom end and roundness as if you fret the note.
Right.
So, but I see it quite often, and there's a lot of things that aren't like brain surgery, but little things that will go a long way. People create a lot of bad habits because nobody's pointing it out to them. And if and when they look at it, and go like, oh yeah, of course this is, but and we all do, and I used to do that too, and I still do. There's things we do that if nobody points it out, it's it makes no sense, and it's just kind of a bad habit.
Right.
But yeah, so those are some of the things, and then everybody's different too. Some people are rhythmically very good, and they have issues with the finger coordination or left hand technique or something like that, and some people have other issues. Some people have a very good ear but a very hard time understanding theory, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. They don't have a great ear but they're very good with theory and stuff like that. So I mean, if you got a little of both or a little of all, if you can kind of grasp all the areas of what's required of playing the left hand, right hand rhythm, you have a good ear, and your comprehension of theory is good too, then I think you got what it takes,
right.
Basically. But there's just many different things you got to be good at to be great. That's the thing, you can't be lacking in any of those departments, because then you're in trouble.
That gets back, you touched on a perfect subject, because I wanted to ask you, I looked up, and you and I are the same age, and we're only a couple months apart, and so I figure, it had to be similar, if you're listening to rock and stuff, similar influences in what we were listening to. And you mentioned Billy Sheehan, and I wanted to ask you about that, because when you were learning bass, like, who were you first listening to? Because I don't think I was aware, of course, you and I didn't grow up with internet, and that didn't exist. Mm-hmm. I became aware of Tallis, but probably only after he was in Roth's band. You know what I'm saying? Like, they were a New York band, and, I grew up in Atlanta. I wasn't 16 going to New York to see Tallis. Most of those bands that were around, I really honestly got out of like Hit Parade and Circus magazines and found the more obscure bands and looked them up, and I'd read like Eddie Van Halen mentioned how much he liked Alan Holdsworth, so I go check that out and that kind of thing. But like, who are the bands that you were really into that were really inspiring you when you were learning?
Well, when I first started out, believe it or not, it was more like, I had Judas Priest, AC/DC,
sure,
Motley Crue, stuff like that, where the bass was fairly simple.
Yeah.
And that was kind of good in a way to learn and play along with. But I really liked those bands because they had great songs.
Yeah.
Now, then when Maiden came, Iron Maiden, you got the guy who basically ran and owned the band and wrote everything and played more intricate bass lines. He was, and had a great stage personality. He was certainly an inspiration.
Sure.
And also took me to, I didn't understand why the bass players were not more in the spotlight. Something happened in the 80s, and it takes me back to where you talked about Billy Sheehan, but because I don't understand it. I think part of it was like, well, Judas Priest can do it and AC/DC can do it, and they can sell out arenas and play, in front of 50, 60, 70,000 people. So that must be the way to go. So most people got a second guitar player and sometimes keyboards, and they put the laziest guy with the least stage personality, and he became the bass player, and he had to stand over by the drums. And to me, that was really kind of, I never understood that, because to me, the bass is so important. And when I grew up, also, let John Paul Jones or John Entwistle or Chris Squire or, all these people, those are some of the people that, like a guy like Billy Sheehan was inspired by.
Right.
But when the 80s came, he was the only guy that still played, and Greg Chazen from Badlands. I mean, those were the only two guys probably that played bass. Everybody else was just pumping eighth notes.
Right.
And it was sort of like ridiculous to me how, and I think that's part of why the music stagnated too, why that 80s music only could go so far, because you didn't have the real bass players gluing the music together. Like, that's why there was no other, Led Zeppelin,
right?
Because nobody bothered to learn how to play bass, and I hate to say it, it was kind of crazy. So, because to me, you get like John Entwistle, he's like a bass hero. He was the shredder in that band, and
Absolutely.
that band was very successful. Same thing with, Jimmy Page obviously was the founder of Led Zeppelin, and he was sort of like in the spotlight. But John Paul Jones, if you really think of it, was to me probably the most amazing player in the band. As a bass player alone, and then obviously played other instruments too. But he was definitely the Eddie Van Halen of Led Zeppelin, if you ask me.
Right.
I'm exaggerating because they were all amazing, but so it's kind of interesting, and people say like, oh, Billy Sheehan plays too much. I'm like, no, he doesn't. You need to play a lot. If you don't have a second guitar player and you don't have a keyboard player,
right?
Who's going to fill out the holes in the music?
Well, I grew up listening to a lot of, I was big into the Van Halen and the Iron Maiden and all that, but I listened to a ton of Rush, and so I was really into the bass heroes. And so take a band like, the 80s, once it got towards like 87 or so, you had these guys just pedaling on the low E and just open, it's boring. Like, like that's... it's just dull. Like, I want to hear someone who can actually play. And you get those three pieces, like take another land. You mentioned Badlands. Blue Murder was another one that Tony Franklin was all over the place in that band, and it really adds a sonic quality to the music that was missing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the bands that came, like Rush, came early too, and then they came from a different school, and obviously more progressive. But they were a three-piece too, and he was obviously, again, at least an amazing bass player, but yeah, it was. I think there's, I thought of it many times, and I think there was just the era when disco came in the late '70s, and you had punk music, and both of those styles had very simple bass lines. Right. Everything was stripped down, and there was no more moving around like in the Motown music and all that stuff. it was all very simplified. And so when the 80s came and the rock sort of came back, it came back in a different way and a different version of it. It was, everybody wanted to be a guitar hero. So now you had too many guitar players, so each band had 2 guitar players. That's one theory that I have.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to play bass because nobody, that was growing up around the time, there's no bass players really to listen to, that unless you went back 10, 15 years.
Right.
So
that's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point. Until Sheehan came along and really kind of hit the spotlight, and he was kind of paired with Steve Vai, it was, you're right, that early rock of the 80s, yeah, after John Paul Jones, it was like a wasteland. And a lot of those guys probably could play very well. They just maybe, I think there was probably some marketing decisions and producers saying, no, you just stick to the root and do this. And, who knows?
Yeah, that was part of it, who knows?
Yeah.
But, I'm sure there was a lot of molding and, each label wanted 10, that grabbed 5 or 10 bands that sounded about the same and that kind of a thing. So,
right.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. Talk about you again. You got done with your tour with Tara Lynch, and you went to the Dark Sky Choir, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Can you tell us anything about that? Like, how'd that go and what all?
Oh, that was great. Great songs, great guys. And, I got asked to do it right before I left to go on tour with Tara in the UK. And a friend of mine, a guitar player, Ira Black, asked me if I wanted to cover it a couple of weeks because they needed somebody. And I said, sure. And I got the tracks, and I was thinking, man, this might be a lot of, stuff to learn if it's, we got a lot of riffs and a lot of things like that. But, there was it wasn't all easy stuff, but the songs were so good and so structured and well-structured and well-written. I was enjoying it so much, although I was sitting on, the tour bus in the UK learning the stuff. I was really looking forward to it. So I'm like, man, this stuff is slamming. So it was a lot of fun playing with them. And like I said, great guys. And I really had a blast. It was only a couple of weeks. I was covering can't even remember how many shows, maybe 10 shows, something like that, in the East Coast and Midwest. And yeah, really good band. So check them out if you get a chance. And they're going to be on the road. They're going to Europe, I think, this fall, this fall, and this summer. And then I think they're going to work on a new album again. So yeah,
that's cool. What is going on with Foundry? Developments with that?
Yeah, we're working on new music and recording some stuff, and we're looking at booking some more shows this fall, depending on everybody's schedule. Mark was just in Europe and Japan doing a little solo tour and stuff like that. So we've all been busy doing other things, but we're gonna do more stuff this year, and we got some videos coming out to some existing songs that we already have released and stuff like that. So it's going to be some pretty cool stuff coming up.
I'm looking forward to it. You definitely keep your plate full, don't you?
I do. And the thing is, like, people talk about, like, you got to be in 3 bands now. And sometimes 3 bands is not even enough because, if they're none of them are really busy, then, you can be in 7 bands if none of them are really
Mike Portnoy
anything, then it's almost like being in no band, so.
I would say Mike Portnoy can be in 7 bands, yes, but.
Right. And the bands are busy.
Right, yeah.
So.
But yeah, that's cool though. It's one thing I think is neat is, I wonder if part of it's the technology, making it easier to just do things on your own and not wait for a record label to give you $1 million advance. But I mean, you got a lot of these guys, George Lynch, for example, he has been more prolific in the last 10 years or so than he was in the 80s. I mean, he's just putting out stuff and it's good. Yeah. I mean, his stuff with Oni and the Lynch Mob and his stuff with, Doug Pinnick and Ray Luzier, and he's just really cranking out stuff. So a lot of these guys, I wonder if it's just because they can just do it at home, and I don't know if he is, but they can do home studios and email tracks to each other and send demos back and forth and not all meet in LA or whatever.
Well, I hate to say this, and I'm not talking about George Lynch now, but I think in general, some people I think are panicking and trying to round up as much cash as possible before they retire.
Well, that could be it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I didn't want to say it, but that's
no. Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to say it either. But I mean, and I can't blame them. Plus, I think people get older, they cut down on, the kids are grown up.
Right.
They're not drinking as much. They're not running around to pubs with their friends. Music is really, I think people get busier too in that sense, and they realize how time passes by, and that you take advantage of time and all that stuff too, and you sort of learn time management in a different way too. Plus, you record 20 records, the process is gonna be faster probably doing your 21st record, stuff like that. So
true.
There's a lot of different reasons, I think. Also because there's very little money in record making.
Right.
Instead of making one record, you have to make 7 to even make half as much money.
Right.
So that could be part of it too.
You have to make a record to
people
tour
enjoy it,
on.
and I think like you said, the simplicity of having your own setup at home. It doesn't cost you $1 million to make an album, so people are like, well, why not? You just make it. And some people I've worked with recently too. Tell me when they make records and stuff like that, they don't make demos. They just when they have an idea, they put it down, and why record it again? And
right.
I totally agree with that, because sometimes the first time you play something, it's never going to sound better than that. Because it's just that nerve and that energy you have in the way you're playing it. That
Fresh
very
idea.
First time, yeah. So you even if you got to copy and paste that chorus 3 or 4 times, why not? You can do it these days and stuff like that. So, there's different ways of doing things, but but it's nice to see these legends do stuff, and like you said, George Lynch. It's great that these people are busy, and it's inspiring to me. Seeing that these people still have the willpower, the energy to go out there and play. It's great.
Yeah, it's good for the fans too. I mean, it's it gets hard. One thing, it's the older you get, the less you want to necessarily be turned on to new music. And I, of course, with the podcast and stuff, I'm constantly searching out new music. But it's nice to be able to just be like, oh, cool, I can still have guys that I've loved for 30 years putting out stuff, and I can still get something familiar in my hands. But and even if you go like, well, they put out 10 songs that are okay, and there might be 1 or 2 that are great. Oh, they're going to play those 2 live. At least they get some new stuff when they play live too, to kind of add and give you another reason to go out and see them again. So that it's all good. So tell us again, when does the when Dio Returns tour? It's getting ready to hit the road. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We're
starting May 31st. In Fort Myers, Florida.
Gotcha.
And then our last show is June 29th in Las Vegas. So we're doing quite a few cities. We're doing about 21 shows. There's a few cities we don't hit this time. Nashville being one of them. New Orleans, Cleveland. We're not doing the Bay Area, Seattle, or Portland, or Canada. So we got quite a few areas to cover, even if we did another run or the tour for whatever reason continued. So we'll see.
Yeah, you need to, because I'm closest to Nashville. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Right on.
So
that'd be great, man. I got some friends down there, and I'd love to. Definitely love to play down. There's a big music town, so that'd be awesome.
It's great.
Yeah. Imagine.
Yeah. So let's make sure that before we go, I want to make sure everybody knows where they can follow you, where they can catch up on tour dates, all that kind of stuff, and make sure they're up to date on what you've got to offer.
Yeah. I'm on all the social media. Obviously, I think I would say Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Mm-hmm. It's all my first and last name. You find me very quickly there. Mm-hmm. And Facebook, I got, obviously a friend page and a like page. So if you go to the like page, it's kind of easier because my friend page is usually full. But so I usually post updates and tour dates there.
Right.
Also, my website, bjornenglen.com. and bands in town as well. It's a kind of a good sight sometimes to
Yeah.
see when anybody comes near you, and links for tickets and all that stuff too. So
Perfect. Great. Well, I'll be looking forward to, hopefully the tour will get somewhere near me, or I'll zip down to Atlanta. But
cool.
also, I'll be looking forward to new music from Foundry. Always a big fan of you and Mark Bowles.
Thank you.
We'll be looking forward to all that. So great. Oh, I appreciate you. Appreciate hanging out with us, Bjorn. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to hearing more from you soon.
Thank you.
All right.
Likewise. It's been awesome, man. Thank you.
No problem. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take it easy. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.